Welcome, dear students. The focus of the current session is marking the axis synchronically and diachronically. I hope and expect by the end of this session, you will understand how synchronic and diachronic changes in the development of a language interconnect. Well, my dear students, I assume that you have a clarity on what is synchronic and what is diachronic. However, just to quickly remind you of these, synchronic linguistics or synchronic development of a language looks at the changes taking place at any time point in a language, whereas diachronic linguistics looks at the changes or examines the changes that take place in a language through the times, and it is observed how the change has taken place through the history. Well, if we look at the Greek etymology of these terms, synchronic, this chron part of it, and diachronic, this chron part of it, this chron part is shared in both the terms, which comes from the Greek term chronos, meaning time or pertaining to time. As far as the prefix that is attached to this term chronic, that is sin, or the other one dia, they have different meanings. Sin means together or with. Dia means through. So together, with, at a time. And dia, through. Dia, through, chron, time, through time. So I think the terms themselves now give you an idea of what does each of these mean. Well, my dear students, both of these can be used to describe as an approach or a phenomenon or an activity by analyzing its behavior in regards to timeline. Both are related to timeline in the sense one focuses at one point in the timeline, the other focuses at the development of stages in the timeline. To clarify further how they are different yet how they support each other, I would give you the example of the game of chess. Chess is defined as a synchronic game. In fact, if you are playing chess and let's suppose halfway through the game you stop playing it and you leave the chess board as it is, at any time point later on you can pick it up from there and you can start the game. You don't need to remember what happened in the past in that game. In the same way, let us suppose if I am playing a game of chess with somebody and at some point I quit the game. And for example, you take my place. You do not need to know what were the moves that I made, what were the movements that I had. You don't need to know all the past history of that game. From there, whatsoever is on the chessboard, you can pick it up. Looking at the arrangement, of pawns on the chessboard, from there you can continue your game. This is how it is synchronic. Now apply this analogy to language. You don't need to go into the past. Who spoke it how, in what ways, why it was so in the past, etc. is not to be considered. As a linguist, you look at the chessboard of language, the part of that chessboard, in fact, that you select for your study, and you just focus on the movement of pawns at that point and the placement of different pawns at that time point where they are placed. Well, the question is, are synchronic and diachronic explanations of language contrastive or complementary? The answer is quite tricky. In certain ways, they are contrastive. They're opposite to each other. One deals with a time point, the other deals with a time period. However, in many other ways, they are complementary. They support each other. In fact, if we look at how these terms were brought in and brought in use, actually this is a binary pair that was introduced by Ferdinand de Saussure to define the two available temporal axes for the analysis of language. In fact, in Saussure's times, linguistics used to approach language or problems of language from a certain lens. The multiplicity of languages was explored by tracing back the history of each of the languages and by tracing the history back. So, for example, if in the Middle English times or early Middle English times, I would say, or the Old English times, if the syntactic structure of English was to be studied, examples would be taken from history. How would be taken from history? The only available resources of Latin and Greek examples would be used as an example. Now, in terms of nature, English is different from them, so it would not work. Actually, we can use the example of an evolutionary biologist who would trace the history of certain species at this time point just by tracing from where these, where these species can be linked to other species in the past. However, for Saussure, this was not an acceptable idea because he thought that this ignored the most interesting and most important problem of how to account for the existing and operating situation of the language. How, as the language exists now in itself, how to explain that? The historical perspective does not, according to him, give insights into that. So what he suggested was that a snapshot, a picture of language at a particular time needs to be taken. Irrespective of how it was or how it would be, focusing on a particular time, there is a need to explore what is going on at a particular time point. So, by this we can understand how, this taking a picture at a particular time point as a synchronic approach, and by looking at how, the past, kind of biological species, the past, ancestors, how they have contributed towards making it what it is today. This is the point, this is the marking of the axis where we can say, both the perspectives on language, the diachronic and synchronic, they support each other and they complement each other.